Factoring special cases. Difference of two squares. Difference meaning that we are going to subtract. 2 meaning that we are going to have a binomial. Square meaning that we are going to have factors of 1, 4, 9, x squared, and x to the 4th power. A simple rule for the difference of squares is that you are going to take the square root of the first term plus the square root of the second term, and then you multiply that by the square root of the first term, subtract the square root of the second term. So for this problem, you'll want to recognize that x squared and 4 can be square rooted. We see that x times x will get us x squared, and 2 times 2 will get us 4. The next thing we'll want to do is put all the numbers that we have together to make a equation to get our factors. Remember that for difference of squares, we will have to have one subtraction sign and one addition sign. Next, we will want to FOIL out what we have of all our factors. So to simplify x squared minus 4, we want to do x plus 2 times x minus 2. Our next topic for factoring special cases is greatest common factor. Now we will find the greatest common factor of 4x squared plus 10x. We know that 4 and 10 have a common factor of 2, and that x squared and x have a common factor of x. Now that we know that the greatest common factor is 2, we will want to divide our problem by our GCF. Make sure that we remember to put the GCF on the outside of the parentheses. Our final step for this equation is to make sure once we FOIL it that we will get the same answer that we started with. Now we want to find the GCF of 16a squared plus 8a subtract 44. Remember to bring down the sign of the b term, which is 8a. We see that this equation has a common factor of 4. Therefore, we need to divide the whole term by 4. Once we have divided our term by 4, we see that our final answer for the greatest common factor is 4 times 4a squared plus 2a subtract 11. Remember, the last step for this term is to make sure that we get the answer that we started with. For the term 14x cubed plus 21x squared subtract 28x, we see that they have a common factor of 7x. So we want to make sure that we bring down 7x, and 14 divided by 7 is 2x squared plus 3x subtract 4. And our last step is to FOIL and make sure that we get the same answer that we did in the beginning. Perfect square trinomials. Perfect square means that we'll have factors of 1, 4, 9, x squared, and so on. A trinomial means that we will have 3 terms. To find the pattern of a perfect square trinomial, you need to find the square root of the first term, find the square root of the third term, and then you need to add or subtract and then raise it to the power of 2 to find the second term. So we need to find the square root of 4x squared and the square root of 25 so we can figure out our factors for this equation. Once we have found the factors for this term, we need to put them together and remember to bring down the addition sign that is in term B. Now that we have all the factors for this equation, we need to make sure that we did it right and we can check our work. As we look at the numbers that we will be using, for this equation, we see that we will also have a negative sign because we bring it down from the b term. The final step for this problem is, you guessed it, FOIL to make sure you have the right answer. As usual, find your square roots of your a and your c term and bring down the positive from the b term. Put together the two numbers that you get for each, and then you will have your simplified version of perfect square trinomials. Last but not least, FOIL it out and make sure you combine like terms. Now you can square root the functions. 9x squared goes to 3x. The square root of 4 goes to 2, and you need to bring down the positive sign. Combine both numbers and square root it. Once you have FOILed, you know that you have the right answer. Now we are going to do some mixed problems. I will give a term, and you will have to figure out if it is a difference of squares, perfect square trinomial, or if it is a greatest common factor. So we start off with 16x squared subtract 49. Make sure you pause this video to solve, and then we can check our answer. Okay, so we know that 16 and 49 is the difference of squares. So you see that 16 is a square root of 4, and x is a square root of x. 49 is a square root of 7, so we would go 4x, and we would bring down the square root of 49, which is 7, and we would subtract, and we would have to have another one that was a plus to make it a difference of squares. So do the same exact equation on the other side with a plus sign. Our next problem is x squared subtract 8x plus 16. We know that x squared is a factor of x times x, so x would be our first, and 16 is a square root of 4, so we'd bring down a 4. One sign has to be a negative, and the other has to be a positive. Now let's make sure that we have FOILed the correct way and check our answer. So x times x is x squared. X times negative 4 is negative 4x. Negative 4 times x is negative 4x. And a negative 4 times a negative 4 is a positive 16. So this simplifies to x squared subtract 8x plus 16. So we know that x subtract 4 times x subtract 4 is the correct FOIL for this term. For our next problem, we will be doing 25b to the 4th power subtract 110b to the 2nd power plus 121. We see that 25 is the square root of 5. B to the 4th power can be simplified to b to the 2nd power. You need to have a subtraction sign, and 121, if you take the square root of that, it would get you 11. So you need to times this by another 5b squared subtract 11. And now we will check our answer. 5 times 5 is 25b to the 4th. Subtract 55b to the 2nd. Subtract 55b to the 2nd. Plus 121. 25b to the 4th. Subtract 110b squared plus 121 gets us back to the formula that we had at the beginning term. So we know that the answer for the FOIL would be 5b squared subtract 11. And to make this easier, we could erase the second part, and we could just say this would be squared, meaning that you will multiply it by itself. So our next and final problem, we will start with 54x squared subtract 6y squared. So we see that although this is not, you can factor this, so it's a little bit simpler. So we can divide this whole equation or term by 6. This will leave us with 6 and 54 divided by 6 is 9x squared subtract y squared. So from here, we want to find our difference of squares. So we will start where we just left off, 9x squared subtract y squared. So we see that 9 is a factor of 3 and 3. So 3x, because you want to bring down this number down here, and you want to subtract y. So now we have our factors for this FOIL, and we want to have one term that has a plus y. And don't forget to bring down the 6. Now, to check that we have the right answer, we want to make sure So what I would do is don't multiply it by 6 yet. So we're going to do 3x times 3x, which is 9x squared. 3x times negative y is negative 3xy. Positive y times 3xy equals plus 3xy. And a negative y times a positive y equals a negative y. So that will be 9x squared, subtract 3, subtract y, because this right here cancels out since you have one positive and one negative sign. Now we bring down the 6, and 9 times 6 equals 54, x squared, subtract 6y squared. So now we know that we have the right answer, and that 6 times 3x plus y times 3x minus y is the correct answer.